you will find on your desk a sheet of paper. On this sheet, Robert Slodover was so kind to reproduce a text which I had brought this morning, and I thought it is better that you read it rather than that I read it again. It speaks about the meaning of mantra. The name of the composition mantra was clear fairly soon after I had thought about a composition for two pianos. So the entire structure of the piece was quite different when I started it in 1969. And the very first idea came in a car. We were 4 people in the car, and the 3 others were talking about this and that. It was on a car ride in America between Madison, Connecticut and Boston. And I heard this melody that I wrote on an envelope that I had in my pocket. This melody has all the 12 different notes that one can find in an octave. When I was humming it, I tried to complete, the longer it lasted, the more notes I found, to complete it in a way that I used all the 12 notes. Then, more than a year later, I threw away a piece for 2 pianos that I had begun, and I used this melody. I started working on it. I should add that during this car ride, I immediately had a vision quite different from previous ones. I imagined that melody stretched over a very long time span, perhaps an hour, and that around each note the same melody would occur in a shorter time, and each of the notes would be something like a sun with 11 planets around it, or 12 planets around it. It has 13 notes. And then I could again, I thought, compose around each of these individual notes another 12 notes, and derive from that something like a system of stars. I did this later on, but in order to be able to compose an entire world out of one thing, there must be variety. And then the mental work started. The first thing I did is that I gave to the different notes that you have just heard more precise durations, which can be counted. And you will see later on the blackboard that the durations are organized as followed. The whole melody, which I then later called the mantra, the formula, has 4 limbs like a body. There's a first limb. It's separated from the second by a pause. There's a second limb, which is separated again by a pause. There's a third one, separated by a pause. And there's a fourth one, separated by a pause from what is to follow. And the first limb has 4 elements, 4 notes. Da, dee, da, da. Here they look already more complicated. And this I'm going to explain next. La, da, ba, da, dee, dum. Dum, da, 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 da. Dee, da, da. You see, we have 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2 notes repeated 3 times. So we have 4, 2. Then we have dee, da, 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 da. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1 is repeated. And 3. Ya, da, dee. 4, 2, 5, 3. Then the duration of the first 4 notes are all different. They are now, if we start counting, and the piece is entirely based on time that has a pulse. We have da, dee, da, da. 1, 2, 3, 4 as durations. And then we have la, da, dee, da, dee, da, which means 3 times 2 or 6 times 1, we can say. The next one has da, da, dum, be, da, which means 5, 2, 1, 3, 4, and then ta, ta, ti, 4, 2, 6, which is proportionate to 2, 1, 3. The overall duration now is 10, 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4, 6, which is 3 times 2 or 6 times 1, subdivided again into 2, 3, 1. There is that little extra in order to make it a little more subtle to have 2, 3, 1 within the 6. And then 5, 2, 1, 3, 4, adding to 15, and the last ones to 12, which is twice 6. So they are corresponding. This one feels already when one hears the piece, the mantra. So they are all different in duration, number, and now we should go a little bit further into the inner articulation of these 4 limbs. To each of the melody, I have added a mirror melody, which means the second limb is put in reverse in a mirror form together with the first limb. Da, da, dee, da, dee, da, and then here, da, dee, da, dee, da, dee. We have a mirror against the first limb, and the mirror is derived from the second limb. And the second limb itself is combined with the mirror of the first one. I'm going to play this now. So the simple mantra is this. I do not play the small notes which you see on the blackboard, just the individual notes. And then the second limb. Now, the mirror of this form is, when I mirror the mantra, it is, so the mantra mirror would be, I mirror exactly the steps, the intervals. What goes up, goes down, and then. There is a crossing of voices, as we say. And if we do not want the crossing of the voices, then hear this. For example, the green part in the second limb is, which is the same like. So and this one is combined with the second limb. Whereas now the first limb, what is on the blackboard in green, the upper part, is combined with that it is an artistic freedom, that note. Because it would have hit on the same note. You see, in the upper part is, and it's pretty dull to do now this. You see, because then I have, there you see, then the piece would be finished though. Because it is a consonant, so though it's better to make, aha, it's still sharp, so I can continue. Well, there you are. So listen, please. This is the combination of the first limb with the mirror of the second one. Then the other one I played already is combined with that chord too, but this I explain later. Now we have it's written in blue, the third limb, the upper part. And I have combined it with the mirror of the fourth limb, which was now we have it. There it is. So please. And now I play the fourth limb, the upper part, and there we have the mirror of the third limb underneath. Whereas the third limb is combined then with the mirror of the fourth. The fourth one was, it's in brown here. And you hear it, the mirror? That's the mirror form. So, that would be the exact mirror. We have now in the piece, I can say this already, this combination of a limb with the counterpart of another limb changes. One is combined with two here, and two with one. In others, there's one combined with three, or one with four, etc. Now, I would like to ask Romaniuk, please be so kind and play now once what I am going to explain. The next one is, I had mentioned that this formula, the mantra, might serve for a complete composition. And in order to achieve this, I need variety. The variety, I thought, should be already in the original mantra. And you will hear now that each note of the 13 notes has a different character. And each of these characters becomes determining for an entire section of the composition. The first note is a note with regular repetition and with the dynamics piano. Just this note. Yes. It is regular repetition. The second note is a note which has an accent at the end. Then the third note is a normal note. It is just a sound. Please. The next one has what we call grace notes. Here are just 4. That is the minimum that's needed in order to center a few fast notes, like a head of a being, around the center itself, which is an E in this case. Please. Yes. Now play 7 notes, any notes around the E in beginning. Well, just a moment, I do it. You see, if I have, it could be, I can play, or it can be any cloud of notes around this nucleus. That's what I want you to understand, the potential of each of these characteristics. I cannot speak Polish yet, excuse me. Will come. We have to learn all these languages, I would say, with the European market now. The next note, 1, 2, 3, 4. The next note is coupled. 5 and 6 are coupled together. And what they really are, as a regular repetition of the pair, is what we call a tremolo, a regular tremolo, only slow. Play it, please. Yes, the end is something special. I will explain that. But ya da dee da dee da, that could be dega 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 dega. That could be also even much slower, or any interval. What is important is this, what we call tremolando, this tremolo. Then this was the 5th and 6th, but the 6th one also has its own character. And it is the following: the 6th note is always connected simultaneously with a chord. So please play this, and then this with the last chord. If you want to know what this chord is then in this chord are just these 5 notes vertical. I have explained before, so I can allow myself to show you what the pitches are. These are the first 2, and in the second one, so they together just sound like this. And that is this chord, which you just played. So now we have the seventh note has an accent at the beginning. The eighth note, be careful. The eighth note is always connected with the previous one with all the intermediary chromatic notes. Please. So this is typical for the eighth note, that it is always connected with the previous note. You will see that this is not always the same interval, with all the notes in between. It's a continuous connection. It could also be a glissando if it were not a piano. And now we have the ninth note is always a staccato, always a short note, and forte. Yes. The 10th note is always an irregular repetition. Here in its most simple possibility, we have duration of 3 plus 4. And in the whole tempo, it is slow at the moment. Repetition but irregular. There we had repetition but regular. Mm-hmm. And then the next note, which is 11, 7, 8, 9, 10. The 11th note has, just a moment, it has the minimum of what we call a trill. Yadadam. That small formula is the smallest possible formula of what we call a trill. Please. Yes. Make once a long trill with these two notes. Just yagadagadagadagada. That is what we call a trill. And the shortest possible one is yadadam. The next one is what we call a sforzato. It has a sharp attack and immediately a soft decay. This is a special kind of piano attack. Please. Aha. He attacks it and then immediately he releases this and he pushes it down again muted without a new attack. Sforzato. And the last note is always connected with any lower or higher note that is around through what we call an arpeggio, which means one or two or more hands full of notes that go just in one direction, or sometimes it's a little broken, but in general it goes in one direction and it ends into the note. That's it. Now please hear to the whole mantra and try to follow all the 13 characteristics. Please, the whole thing. Oh. Follow the dynamics. Now, all we need now is to imagine that each of the notes determines an entire section of a given composition, or a region, as I call it. In such a region, we could have, for example, 13 times the mantra, and each time in a different form. What could be different forms of this mantra? I have already mentioned before that, for example, in combining limbs with each other in mirror forms, I find new varieties. this would be a variation technique to combine this with this and vice versa, to combine this with this and vice versa. There are other possibilities. Or I could say that the rhythm of this is used for with the notes of this one, and vice versa. The rhythm of this could be used with any other section of notes, etc. And I will show you now the next state of the development of this composition. I thought if I do not base this formula, the mantra, on a chromatic scale, which is given by the piano, where we have 88 keys, and each note has the same distance from the note below and from the note above as all the others. But if I make myself now, out of this given scale, new scales by leaving out, for example, certain notes, then something very interesting happens to this mantra. Please, Roger, would you come and play, for example, another scale? I have written up a few scales. All in all, I have used 12 different scales. This mantra is based on the chromatic scale. I have used all 12 possible steps within one octave. A, B, G sharp, E, F, D, G, E flat, D flat, C, B flat, G flat, and A. The 13th note is identical with the first one. So there are all the 12 different possible notes within one octave. And it has the most narrow width. Now, if we use, instead of a chromatic scale, the chromatic scale you all know, just play a little bit of the chromatic scale, but listen to the steps. Etc. They are all equal. Now play to the scale number 2, which is slightly stretched. What does it mean, stretched? I replace an octave. Play an octave, please, from A to A. Just play la ta. It sounds almost like the same note. But if I replace this octave by another interval, let's say by a major ninth, then yes. And I say this is an octave now. This is an octave. Then everything is slightly stretched. To give you an example, when as children we had, for example, rubber. There's a special kind of rubber, and you make a drawing. You put the rubber on top, let's say on a face that you have drawn, and then you draw it in different directions. Then the face becomes like this or like that. See? You can stretch it in all directions. And the same happens now to this mantra when I base it on a different scale of proportions and no longer on this chromatic scale. Please play the scale number 2. Now you have to be careful. This is now the scale number 2, the second narrowest that I have used. Just go all the way through. Emphasize the octaves, which are major ninths. So this is now our piano. The steps which are left out, well, we don't know them. I could make an entire piece just based on that scale. Then the mantra sounds as follows. Play mantra number 2. Just without all the the characteristics, just the notes. Please play now this mantra, which is based, yes. There, from here on. So there are a few changes compared to the original mantra. It's slightly, we can say, distorted compared to the original one. Instead, for example, of, which was the original, we have, you hear that change. And the second one was, in the second scale, it is, which means it is slightly larger. It's a minor second larger, the interval. And then we had in the original, which has become, and then the original was, and here it is, has remained the same. So there was no change, which means we have, through the change of a scale, an expansion of the mantra. Now we make the scale still larger. Please play the next scale. He emphasizes the octaves again. But they are no octaves. So, based on this scale, the mantra sounds as follows. Which means, instead of, we have now, and instead of, we have, and instead of, we have, and instead of, we have. And now we have the fourth scale, just to give you a feeling how the stretching works. Fourth scale, please. Number 4.
2 and 4.
Aha, yes, that's right. So I showed you the 3 smallest ones, and now we show one in the middle. We don't need to play all of them. Which has the middle quality of expansion. 6, now 6. Which means now the piano has got only 3 octaves and a little more, which are equaled to the original 7.5. And the mantra played or transformed on this scale sounds as follows. Yes? That's it. You hear how it's stretched. And now the scale number 11, it is, do I have 10 too?
Yeah.
Well, play 10. You don't need to emphasize anymore, just... So as you hear, several intervals are within this scale. And I have done this on purpose, because if I compose now a given formula within this scale, it is expanded irregularly. It's not expanded proportionately, but it is distorted. And this is very interesting, very important. Please play number 10.
Number 10 is here in my class.
You have it now, don't you? No, this one. Aha, yes. Yes, play it a little slower, please. Just a moment. You hear da, 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 ki, ko, ko, how wide this interval has become. And the second limb. Just a moment, just a moment. That's the third limb. Play the third again. No, no, ji, da, da, dum, dum. That's it. And then now the fourth limb. So. I show you just the 11th, based on the 11th scale. Play the 11th scale, please. Major thirds mainly. So, and then the mantra, just without the rest from here. Just a moment, please. Just a moment. Did you hear that? Da, ba, pi, ba, pi, ba. It's enormously stretched now, almost over the entire piano. So this has become, and then this has become, and then has become, right, and then the end has become, yes. And finally, the largest expansion, which reaches over the entire range of the piano, is the 12th expansion, please. The scale first. Yes. And the mantra sounds. There's the crossing. So, this is how I have derived from the original mantra, based on 12 different scales, different expansions of the original form. 12 different expansions. The same is applied to time later on, to the duration of the mantra. But let's hear now first how these different forms of the mantra appear at the beginning of the piece, how all the 13 forms appear. I have drawn the entire work in its formal construction on this board, and the black numbers which are in circles indicate durations. As you know now, the first mantra lasts itself 10 plus 6 makes 16, plus 15 makes 31, plus 12 makes 43, plus 1 makes 44, plus 4, 48, plus 2 makes 50, plus 3 makes 53 time units. And these 53 time units are indicated in these 53. So these 53 here are the mantra that we have been talking about up to now. Whenever there is now another number in a circle, it means that the mantra is either doubled or quadrupled in time. For example, twice 53 makes 106. And 4 times 53 makes 212. Half of 53 is 26.5. I have written 27 in order to get complete units. Half of this is 14, or to be more precise, 13.25. But in this case, as I have taken 27, I say 14 units in order to get whole numbers. The next one would be 7, layers of 7, and the smallest or the shortest mantra, which is the most condensed, compressed in time, lasts approximately 3 time units. Time units are to be defined in another way. I speak of time units. That doesn't mean that these are necessarily seconds or heartbeats, but time units to be defined. So the complete structure now, as you see, is like a tree of life, or like a tree of a family. You have the longest, which means also automatically the slowest mantras twice, here and here. From these are centered in the middle and before and after 3 times 106. From each of these 106 is derived a pair, which is 53, 53, 53, and here's an exception, which means I go already into the next layer, into the next generation. You will find out why this is the case, because the overall duration I have to take in account 2. 2 times 212, 3 times 106. Then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times 53. I want that the total durations of these sections approximate as much as possible. That's why here 1 is already becoming 27. So we have here the pair correspondingly 53, 53 related to this center. 53, here 27 to this center. 53, 53 to this center. Now each of these 53 is again subdivided. As this was the beginning, we have here only one branch, the 27. Here 27, 27 related to this 53. 27, 27 related to this 53. Then here this 27, which has already gone in the next generation, has 14, and here a multiplication of 14. This I explain later. There are sometimes rows of 14s or 7s or 3 durations. This has a particular reason. I can explain it right away. If I would use as many short as long mantras, the piece would become a very slow piece, because the slow and long always eat up the short and fast ones. Which means if we have something that is very slow and lasts very long, it must be equaled by a lot of things that are fast and short in order to balance out the total time that has been occupied with the slow events. If one wants a piece that is balanced out in its inner rhythm, one should use more or less in total time quantity as much fast things in order to fill a certain amount of time, or to make become alive a certain amount of time, as much as one fills with the slow things. Therefore, there is a logarithmic progression from the slow to the fast. The shortest, the number 3, occurs to such an extent that it fills almost as much total time as these two slowest ones. I don't know exactly the number of the mantras of duration 3, but you can see that there are many. 140 or something like this, I don't know exactly. No, that is exaggerated. It must be 100 and something. Because all in all, we know from another determination that it is 13 times the cycle. 13 times 12, which makes 156. So I just show the further derivations of durations. From the 27, we have always derivations of a pair again, here of the 14. The other one is not there. 14, and here I jump already in the generation of 3. Here 14, then from the 27, 14 and 3. From the 27, 14, 14, or here from the 14 we have the 7 in one branch. Here another 14 with the 7 combined and the 3. You see, the further we come to the shorter mantras, the more there is variety in combining the total durations of 14, 7, and 3. From these 27, 14, 14, from these 27, 14, 14, from these ones 14, and here we have the 7 related to the 27, and finally we come to the shortest durations of the mantras. What we can see here is that sometimes a duration that I have just explained, or a mantra, is left completely alone, like in this case. It is even no longer complete. One of its layers, each mantra, as you know, has 2 layers, the upper and the lower. A mantra with its mirror forms in different combinations. In some cases, I have left out either the upper part completely or the lower part completely. And then I write here on the blackboard, mono, which means only one layer is there. And when the arrow is going downwards, then I have used only the lower part. When the arrow is going upwards, like here, then I have used only the upper part. Then it is a monodic music, just like a single melody without anything going with it, without counterpoint. So this is the simplest case. We have a 212 time units long mantra, and it is even mono, which means the lower section, lower part is not there. We have one melody. This is one extreme. The other extreme is that simultaneously with a longer mantra, several shorter ones are combined. And here we are. As I have many more shorter ones than longer ones, I must put them somewhere. So I put them into the longer ones simultaneously. There we have sometimes a 4-part counterpoint, because each mantra has 2 parts, and when we have another mantra on top, then we have 4 parts. For example, here it is the case. The first mantra is as it is. It is without any combination with another one. The second mantra is already combined with a shorter one, 7 and 3. Then we have, if you want to follow the order of the different mantras as they occur in the piece, you follow the green lines. Here, these lines with these small lines going across. So this is then the definite reading order. The black lines indicate how I have them derived, but this is how they sound in the piece. So the third one here, the 2 times 7, is a multiplication, which means I have now groups of shorter ones. Let's say 3 times 14, 1 times 14, 4 times 14, 2 times 14. Then we have 1 times 7, 5 times 7, 5 times 7, then we have 2 times 7, and 7 times 7, and 3 times 7. These are groups where I combine immediately one after another several mantras of the same speed, the same duration. Of 3, for example, we have even larger groups. We have 10 times 3, 3 times 3, 2 times 3, 6 times 3, 1 times 3, 15 times 3. Is that all? Yes. Well, why these numbers? You know, 1, 2, 3, 6, 10, 15 are very important numbers in music and in general. The next one would be 21, 28, 36, 45, 54, 66, and 78. It is always adding the next number. So 1 plus 2 makes 3. So if I have 1 plus 2 plus 3 makes 6, then I can permutate these 3 and it always makes 6. Then the next growing number is adding 4 makes 10. Adding 5 makes 15. Adding 6 makes 21. Adding 7 makes 28, etc. These are series of numbers with which one can work. So that there's nothing astonishing in the fact that I have groups of 3 which are 1 times 3, 2 times 3, 3 times 3, 6 times 3, 10 times 3, 15 times 3. Then the next one would have been 21 times 3, but I didn't use it. I didn't need it. Then there are individual 3s, small, I have even more than the groupings, which are now added into other ones. For example, here we have 1, 7 and 1, 3 mantra in the 27 one. In the 106, we have 1 of 27, 1 of 14, 1 of 7, and 2 of 3. Then in the next 27, we have 1 of 3, 1 of 7, 1 of 3, etc. So sometimes there are many smaller mantras within here, within a large one. Or here, this mantra is the extreme opposite to this one. This was mono, just with one melody. Whereas here we have the mantra and a mantra of 53, and a mantra of 27, and of 15, and of 7, and 2 of 3, simultaneous with this mantra of 212, which means there are several layers of speed superimposed. Now I come to the next characterization. Actually, I'm coming back to the mantra itself. There are 13 characteristics, we said, given by the different notes. Regular repetition, accent at the end, normal note, appoggiatura or grace notes around the center, tremolo, etc. These characteristics now determine an entire section of the piece, which means 12 different mantras are each time determined by one characteristic. And we hear now the first large section of the piece, which goes up to here, where it says Roman numeral number 2. There begins the second large region of the piece. And this then would be the first large region. And within the first large region, we have 12 different mantras, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Up to here, all the mantras have something in common. Further on, up to here, I have underlaid all the 12 mantras, in addition to what I've explained, one very slow mantra, which has exactly the characteristic of the first note. And this you are going to hear now. It is always soft, and it draws together the variety of the first 12 mantras. We play now, please, only the repeated notes. How did I find the duration of this? It is nothing but the sum of all the 12 mantras, the first mantras, added up to here, and then subdivided proportionately into the durations that are given in the mantra itself. In 53 units, and then I find these notes. Now this is, if I can say, the structure of the bones of the entire first section, and on top you will hear now the individual mantras. The first one you have heard at the beginning, we don't need to play it again. The second one, of duration 27, here is indicated as 3, which means in the mantra itself there is a chromatic order, you know that, from A to G sharp. A is number 1 as a note. Then the next higher note, A sharp, would be number 2. The B is number 3. So the second note in the mantra is number 3. Then the next is C, which is here, is number 4 in the chromatic scale. The C sharp or D flat would be number 5, etc. Until G sharp is number 12 in the chromatic scale. Do you understand what I'm saying? I see a few faces that don't. I play it. That's quite important. Let's say I have here a chromatic scale. And I say this is 1, then this is 2, then this is 3, then this is 4, this is 5, and this finally is 12. 1 to 12. Now, if I say the first note is 1, then the entire mantra, 53, the very first number, is named the number 1. The second note in the mantra is number 3 in a chromatic scale. And I have taken these numbers now for the expansion of the mantra itself. So which means the second mantra will have the expansion number 3. The third mantra will have the expansion number 12. The fourth mantra will have the expansion number 8. The next mantra will have the expansion number 9. And expansion, you know what I'm talking about. We have heard these expansions. Then the next mantra will have the expansion number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The next mantra will have the expansion number 11, the G. The next one, expansion number 7. The next one, expansion number 5. And number 4, number 2, number 10, and number 1. That means 1 and 13 are identical. And we hear now these expansions. Please play now the expansion number 3, which is the second in the piece. Right. So it's characteristic that the second mantra in the piece has as many accentuated notes at the end as possible, which means also the character of the second note now becomes determining for the complete mantra itself. Da 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 ti, da 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 da, that comes from the second note. Just play the beginning again. Da da ti. You see, all the notes now get an accent at the end, which was the character of the second note of the mantra. So now the complete second mantra has the quality of the second note. On top of this, we hear the 12th mantra, derived from the fact that it is the 12th expansion because it is the third note in the mantra itself. We hear now this of duration number 7 with expansion number 12, please. That's it. And then immediately afterwards we hear a mantra which has the duration 3, which is the shortest, the most compressed, with the expansion 8, which was derived from this one. Please. There it is. Extremely contracted. Now we hear the next mantra, which has the expansion number 9. And it has a duration 7. Expansion is derived from this note. It was the 7th note in the mantra. Please. Who has it? Did you hear? The tremolo determines this one, whereas the previous one, Romagno, could you play that again, the number 8? You hear? No, yeah. Let's play it again. It has as much as I can, these grace notes inside, whereas the expansion number 9 had the tremolos inside. Now we hear the mantra number 6 that should have chords. Play that, please, with the chords. That should become clear. Almost every note has a chord. Play it a little slower and emphasize the chords. They're always there. Chord, chord, chord. So it's filled with chords, which comes from here. The 6th note, or the 6th mantra up here. So the next one should have many accents at the beginning, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It's mantra with the 11th expansion and very short. No, not so short. It's 14. 14. Accents at the beginning, please. ta-da, tiki, ta, ta, ta. Always the accent at the beginning. It comes from this note. So the entire mantra now has the character of the 7th note. It is the 7th in the order, and it had expansion number 11, like the 7th note was the 11th note in the chromatic scale. What I'm trying to show you is that everything unfolds out of one thing into a cosm, into a musical macrocosm. The next one is expansion number 7, which comes from this note. So there should be a lot of chromatic combinations, connections within this mantra. It has also the duration 14. Who has it? Here all the notes are combined with chromatic notes in between the notes. There you are, I said before, chromatic, but based on a different scale. In this case, for example, on the scale number 7, naturally chromatic means something else. It means all the possible notes of the scale. But there are no more than the notes of the scale in this particular case. There's no chromatic scale of the piano itself used, but only the steps of the scale of this particular expansion. Now we have a mantra which is always with staccato. It is derived from the 9th note and has the 5th expansion. Staccato. So it switches from one piano to the other. It's subdivided into 2 parts in space. And now we have the 10th note with irregular repetition, which is derived from this. Well, what is irregular repetition? The extreme of an irregular repetition is, for example, a Morse code. And if you would come to the rehearsals or to the concert, you would hear that at some point in the piece, there's a whole section all of a sudden where not only all the notes are irregularly repeated, but that actually the player opens a radio and uses a Morse code that he receives through a shortwave receiver, and you hear the which come all from these 2 notes. So there is a connection made to all sorts of irregular repetitions of the same note at all speeds, and always with the pitches that are given by the expansion of the mantra. We come now to mantra 4, expansion number 4, which is the... Oh, no, I said this. We must hear that first. 7, 8, 9, 10. Let me hear 10, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It is the very long one, is it? With the 4th, yes. Just a moment, start again. It is the first really longer one, 106 as a duration. On top of this 106 units long mantra based on irregular repetition, we hear the mantra with expansion on the second scale, the second narrowest, compared to the chromatic one, and with a duration 7. It should have the characteristics of trills, which have already occurred in the previous one, like an announcement. Please, we hear now this one. Number 2. That's it. And now the last one in the first large cycle, which is mantra with expansion 10, based on this note here, which means we hear a lot of sforzatos. And it has the expansion corresponding to the G flat in relation to the A. Duration twice as long as the previous one, namely 14 units. Here you are. We have heard the first 12 expansions of the mantra. Each one had the characteristics of the mantra in the order of the notes of the mantra. And I showed you just before these 12 expansions that underlaying as a unifying element, as I said, as the bone of this first region, we have heard the total mantra stretched out in repeated notes. Do you remember this? There was just one mantra going from piano to piano, very long, over the total time span of the first region, only with repeated note. And you hear now both together. So you hear the repeated notes underlying, plus the 12 first expansions of the mantra. I should say that each mantra in the first section starts with an A. You may have heard this. The A, which is the first note. Each section starts again with the A. Though the expansions are different, but they all start with an A and come back to an A as the first and 13th note of the mantra. When you hear now the beginning of this composition, then there's a very short element at the beginning. I said it is the shortest possible introduction in the history of music. And you will hear why. The mantra, as you know, has 4 limbs. In the beginning, you hear 4 chords. Please play the 4 chords. The 4 chords of the beginning of the piece. Thank you. 1, 2, 3, 4. And these 4 chords have the duration 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4, like also the first limb. Play again with the duration. And. Schluss. 1, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. And the notes of these 4 limbs are nothing but the notes of the mantra of these 4 limbs verticalized. The first chord is, which is ya-da-dee-da, as a chord. The next one is these 2 notes. Yes. The next one is these 4 notes. Play them one after another. And together. And the last one is these 3 notes. One after another. Together. So, all 4 chords. Thank you. And we are in the piece. Now we can play, I think, the entire section up to here, as the piece is written. I should say something before they start. I have used an additional instrument, which is called the antic cymbal. Each player has 13 antic cymbals, or a certain number of antic cymbals, and the antic cymbals are exactly the notes of the mantra. And each player uses them throughout the piece, once to to mark the large sections of the composition. So there is an additional timbre, an additional color, which marks clearly larger sections, and it is the symbol that you will hear right at the beginning. And then there's another instrument. I might not be able to explain the complete function of the instrument. Each one has also a wood block. Could you just play a... Okay, and here has one too. There are two wood blocks, and these wood blocks mark, again, cycles in the piece, which I have not explained yet, that they are cycles of character change. There's another cycle superimposed to what I have just explained. Well, please hear now the first region of mantra, with all the 12 expansions. Very sorry. We have forgotten to put the modulation on because we won't play it again tonight. Do you have it on? But I don't hear it. Now I hear it. Yes. Yes. Well, there's something more. I say it only in one sentence, and then we first hear it, and then I explain. The sound of the pianos is modulated electronically. And it is modulated exactly with frequencies, with vibrations that correspond to the 12 notes of the mantra itself. Which means the entire first section in both players' parts is modulated with the first note itself. The further a note goes away from this frequency, which is what we call a mirror frequency, around which everything that is going into the modulator is mirrored upwards and downwards in frequencies. One hears the upper sums and the differences of the incoming signals, and the incoming signals themselves are suppressed, what concerns the output of these modulators. But we hear the piano sound in addition to the modulated sound. Yeah, play once the mantra itself. Aha, a little bit more the modulation. Yes. So there is a principle for a complete new harmonic concept in music. That means if you have such a mirror frequency, the consonances, like the octaves or the notes themselves in relation to the mirror frequency that they are mirrored with, sound fairly normal. They sound like a piano note. But the more the notes of the piano go away from the mirroring frequency, the more the sound sounds anew. It takes on a new timbre, which is the result of the more complicated relationships between the piano notes and the notes of the mirroring frequency that I feed into this modulator. So this might be enough for you. It is chosen in order to establish a new relationship between harmonic structuring and timbre structuring. Now we hear it with the modulators, please. That was the end just of the first region, and we hear a little bit more just to show you how now in the second region all the characteristics, the overall characteristics, will be determined in the background layer by the second note, which is always these accents at the end. And then we have another 12 transformations. You might follow now yourself or copy it afterwards. We have another 12, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And then comes the third region. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And then comes the fourth region. And these, you see, 1, 3, 12, 8, 9, 6, 11, 7, 5. We have here 1, 3, 12, 8, 9, 6, 11, 7, 5. There's the first change. There are slight changes now within the expansions of the notes, but the principle is always followed that the mantra itself is shown on a next larger time scale. Just play a little more of the second region. Still the end of this long one. Was these three. Now we are here. We come on. There. Short. to there. That's enough. Now I have just to add a few more indications about the 13 times 12 cycles, or regions as I call them. Cycles is the right word, because cyclically it always repeats in the order of the notes of the mantra itself the expansions. I have drawn them here once more on the blackboard. Regular repetition, like in the mantra itself, which determines the whole first region. And the second region is notes with accents at the end, according to the second note of the mantra itself. The third one, normal notes, the third region. The fourth region was a lot of appoggiaturas, whereby these notes here, the number of these notes, vary. Then, like the four elements in the first limb, there is here a darker line separating these four, because I have, as you will see later on, only within such larger sections exchanged certain indications, like the ones that I'm explaining in this moment. So they switch around in the order, like here, for example. You see that here the 6 has been here, and now it goes here, chords. Here's tremolo, chords, accent at the beginning. Then we have chromatic or scalar connection between the notes, staccato, morse, which is irregular repetition of the note, trill, sforzato, arpeggio. These are the 13 large regions of the piece. Number 1 here, we have heard these first 12 ones, each one having a different characteristic. You remember, we have played them all. Now the second region, which is here indicated with the red number 2 as well, has almost the same like the number 1. We have first arpeggi, the mantra, which would be here this mantra, this one, 27 in duration. Then with arpeggi combined with regular repetition. Should actually be the other way around. Regular repetition and arpeggi I have added. Then accents at the end is the same normal note, appoggiaturas. 9 as a character is now becoming chords, and the 6 is becoming tremolo. The 2 are exchanged. This is to have not always the same order. Then we have here an exchange. The chromatic connection goes to the previous mantra, and then the accent at the beginning goes to the next one. Morse is exchanged in order with the staccato. Trill and sforzato remain the same. That is this region which is indicated by Roman numeral number 2. Then comes Roman numeral number 3, and you can follow again the order. Here is something new. Though it is the 12th expansion, this number gives always the expansion. You know that in the meantime. 1, 3, 12, 8, 9, 6, 11, 7, 5, 4, 2, 10, 1. These were the expansions which correspond to these blue numbers. But the expansion is not always now with the same characteristic, as I have explained. There are exchanges. For example, here all of a sudden, we see an accent at the beginning, which in the previous one was here. Normal was here, with 8. So that one by one, you would find that in the piece now the same expansions have different characteristics, so that there is not too much pre-established connection of character and expansion. You see 8 has here, for the third time, the second time, appoggiaturas or grace notes. Then it has normal notes, accents at the beginning, arpeggi, and regular repetition. the 8. I begin now to change the character which is related to the same expansion. Like here the number 9, number 9, number 9. Number 9 has a chord, number 9 has grace notes. Then here number 9 has tremolo. In this we should look whether number 9 has moved. Number 9 is here, with tremolo at the very end, and here too. This had another reason. I first started writing everything out in the same order like in the beginning, but then I found out that, for example, a specific expansion would automatically have to be connected with the same duration sometimes. And then I changed the order of the expansions, because I wanted that the same expansion, when it reoccurs, has a different duration. And that led me then to these exchanges of the numbers which indicate the expansions. You indicate this? You understand this? That the same expansion should have different durations, or vice versa. If one combines almost automatically here two different number orders, then one comes to solutions which give several times exactly the same combination. And in order to vary, then I change the number of the expansion, which is here the case. So we have 1, 3, 12, 8. Then here all of a sudden 1, 6, 12, 8. So the 6 goes instead of the 3, because here I would have to have a 3, but it would occur with the same duration, and I didn't want this, so I put a 6 in here. Because the 6 obviously also had occurred in this row with the same duration, and it was a good reason to exchange the two, etc. So finally, you see the principle of varying more and more. I have only drawn it up to the 6th region. There are, as you know, 13 all in all. They would have to follow. I didn't need to copy this too, but you see the principle now. Increasing variation of the relationship between expansion and character. There's something that is not clear from this explanation is the following. Every now and then, after I had written out all these pre-established structural principles, every now and then I tried something out on the piano while I was composing. It was a second state. And then I got caught many times by what I heard, what I tried out. And I call these excursions, musical excursions, or in another context I have called them insertions. For example, I remember once I was trying, where is that, 205? 205. I mean the measures now. There was one evening, I remember a structure which I had to compose, which was like this. And it came with, excuse me, what is it? Yes. That was it. And I had a determination of durations which was too fast for these intervals. So I thought, what can I do? I was trying out always these pitches. Trying them out in the rhythm, and then I thought, put a metronome, and thought it has still to be faster. It has. I thought they are going to make notes, and after a while I thought, what shall I do? And then I had the idea, well, I just compose this. And that is what you're going to hear now. You hear that structure, it begins, and then it leads to a complete excursion before we come back into the piece. Just hear it. We'll play it now. there are many more of this sort of excursion. So I got, for example, caught by one little element of the mantra, and I pushed the pedal, and that sounded very, very wonderful in that particular register and with that particular constellation. And then I started repeating it for about 20, 30 times until I came back. I didn't prepare you to show this. Where is that, for example? I might look at it. It is not important. Please, I mean, you can hear it during the rehearsals or whatever it is. There are many of this sort of insertions or excursions which just came from the pianistic experiments that I made myself during the composition process. When I came closer to the end, and in this particular case I overlooked naturally from the very first moment on the entire piece, except of these excursions. When I came almost to the end, I had the idea that it came like a flashlight, and I didn't think twice, that it would be wonderful to bring once the entire piece at that particular moment, which was a moment after a long lyrical part, to show the entire piece in its extreme compression, which means all the mantras which are drawn out here with different durations and different characteristics, compressed to such an extent that each note has just the time to be played as fast as possible and without any characteristics, because there's no time. There can also be no dynamic differentiations because there is no time. Everything is extremely compressed in time, and you hear now the total work, again I say, except the excursions, of the 156 mantras, 13 times 12, in the shortest possible time. Naturally, I could have done this almost mechanically, but what happens is that with each new section in the mantra, one complete mantra is verticalized, which means it is that the notes are played together in a chord. And that leads naturally in 13 times 12 mantras more and more to a complete verticalization of the piece until it finally stands still, because it's nothing but chords. But each chord lasts as long as the notes, if they would have been played one after another, would have taken in time. Understand? So if you imagine the whole piece played as melodies that go up and down with the mirror form, and then after the first section I have one chord, and it lasts just as long as 12 notes would have lasted, or 13 notes would have lasted. And then the second time, next chord, so we have already 2 chords, until finally the last section, all the last 12 mantras are all verticalized in chords, and the whole piece gets stuck. It's vertical. The melodies have become blocks of sound. You know where to start? It's just before that fast section. You go into it where it announces ta-ta. No. Start a little earlier where it goes ta-ta-tim, and then the other one ta-ta-tim. Yes, and then the other one did ta-ta-tim, and then you went ta-ta-tim. Then you go. Yes. Understand? Well, I have arrived today, and we will work on this. And a little bit. No, it simply means that a few things that one can say. I have worked the piece before, and then it becomes easier to hear and to play. That is almost all one can say about the structuring of mantra. For those who want to go into more detail, anyway, such a lecture is not enough. But you can get an overall view of what I did. I started with one formula, which I later on called a mantra, because in our language there is no word. We have had the word theme or motive in classical music, but these entities, these formulas were always used in a completely different way. We have had the word series, but also series, with which I have worked for many years, has a completely different meaning. Mantra is, as it is said in this text, which I found in a book that I read during the time when I conceived mantra, a book written by Sat Prem about Sri Aurobindo, or the adventure of consciousness, where he spoke about the mantric art. And I quoted it simply because I found these were the best words to express what I had done. I had many other words in mind before, and I discussed them with friends. And when I came up with the word mantra, most of the people that I asked back, what does it mean? They did not know what it means. They had heard a little bit about mantras in India, and about the fact that certain words are given by masters to pupils to repeat these words, but none of us really has a clear education in mantric technique, which is a very precise technique. And only later I became more familiar with this technique. I consider this formula, which is a microcosm that has led to a macrocosm which lasts over 63 minutes without a break, which is a very long duration in our tradition of music, in our context here in the West. I called it mantra. Just look at a few phrases that I'm referring to. Where it says, where Aurobindo says what mantra is. He says, there exists in India a secret knowledge based on the study of sounds and the differences of vibratory modality according to the planes of consciousness. As each of our centers of consciousness is in direct communication with the plane, one can thus, by the repetition of certain sounds, and here we should say of certain sounds, of a sound formula, here it's 13 sounds, put oneself in communication with the corresponding plane of consciousness, which I certainly wouldn't like to define, this particular plane of consciousness. But the repetition is quite clear in its expansions, 156 expansions, different in 13 large cycles, which are nothing but the projection of the mantra itself into a large time and space. The basic or essential sounds which have the power of establishing the communication are called mantra. And in that sense, I think I'm using this word in a legitimate way for my composition. The mantras, always secret and given to the disciple by the Guru, that doesn't concern us here. He says, there is a sound, here the sound carries in itself the power of experience and realization. It is a sound that makes one see. He speaks of mantras which kill, mantras which attack with precision a particular part or organ of the body, mantras which heal, mantras which kindle fire, which protect and spellbind. But he calls them combination of certain sounds one can at lower levels of consciousness, general at the vital level, put oneself in relation with the corresponding forces and obtain many strange powers. That's the one he quotes then. He speaks here of the lower levels. But what is more interesting to us is then what is in the second block. Poetry in music, Poetry in music, which is an unconscious handling of secret vibrations, may then be considered a powerful means of the opening of consciousness. If we could succeed in composing poetry or music, which is the product of a conscious handling of higher vibrations, we would create great works having an initiatory power. Instead of a poetry which is the fantasy of the intellect and a notch girl of the mind, as Sri Aurobindo says, we would create a mantric music, or poetry, to bring the gods into our life. For true poetry is an act. It makes holes in the consciousness. We are so walled in, barricaded, through which the real can enter. It is a mantra of the real, an initiation, etc. So this is perhaps what I'm most referring to. We would create a mantric music, and I would be very grateful if I have to some extent succeeded in this work. You only can judge upon this when you hear the entire work, and I would even say when you have had a chance to dive into its microcosm and relate it to the musical macrocosm. I thank you very much for your attention, and I'm ready to talk with you, to answer questions, if you want to know some more about mantra or other things. Yes?
What suggested that you use two pianos in the first place? Surely
Could you speak louder now?
the work would suggest that you use electronic methods of sound reproduction rather than the piano. In the piano you only get a 12-note scale, whereas by electronics you could produce a scale with an infinite number of notes. Would you not explore the space, say, between a C and a C sharp and so on?
Well, that's the way it is. He says why I did use two pianos and not compose the entire piece for electronic means, because with electronic means I would have had much more subtler scales and other possibilities, and I said that's the way it is. I had in mind to compose a work for two pianos already before. I said I started a different piece, and then I threw it away because I didn't like it. And I came back to this original idea from 1969 to establish a complete composition on one formula. I worked out the formula, and I have never thought of anything else than hearing the entire composition from the beginning on with two pianos. And also writing everything so that it is related to the possibilities of the 10 fingers of each player, and 2 times 10 fingers, and everything they can do with their hands. Yes?
In Mementa, you have intimations of previous works. You have moments dovetailing into works of your past.
Not in Momenta, no.
That you have composed in the past.
In procession, not in Momenta.
Well, are there intimations of other of your works in this piece?
No, no. It's not possible. There's not one single note which is not derived from the mantra. Even if I would like to, I didn't allow myself to add any free note.
No, it's this that the schema appears, superficially anyway, to resemble the schema in Momenta, to look at anyway.
Yeah. You mean the construction principle to have another family tree, though it is quite different? Yes, that is similar to the construction of Momenta.
You've mentioned your use of the ring modulator, and you say that the notes become more dissonant. Yes, more dissonant as they move further away from the center to which the ring modulator is tuned.
Right.
Do you mean this in the chromatic sense of distance, or in the relationship of the notes such as dominant and so on?
No, the more
center?
consonant the interval in relationship to the note that is fed into the modulator is, let's say the most consonant is the note itself.
Yeah.
Could you open the modulator? I can even tune it. Until it's clean. Which means I get the sum and the difference. This is 220 cycles per second, what I'm playing. It makes 220 plus 220 makes 440, and it makes 220 minus 220 makes 0. So what I get actually is just a slight emphasis of the second overtone, the octave. This one. You hear that?
Yeah.
Now the next, what can happen is its octave itself, which reinforces the fundamental. If I play 440, then I get the fundamental, you hear it, which is 440 minus 220, which is fed into the modulator. And you get 440 plus 220, which is 660, which is the third overtone. There it is. So I get slightly changed color, which comes closer to a horn color, like a horn in the orchestra. Only we have here a note which has a decaying curve. But the horn is characteristic for having a specifically loud third overtone. Now the next consonants in relationship to 220 would be the fifth itself, after the octave, which is and the prime, which is this note. Which is 330 cycles per second. It's 220 divided by 2 multiplied by 3 makes 330. Which is in relationship to this note like 2 to 3 as an overtone. Which means that I get 330 minus 220 makes 110, which is the fundamental of these two together. You hear la. There it is. And you get 330 plus 220 makes 550, which is in relation to this. Now the next consonant interval in the order of consonances would be the fourth. Open a little more. So what you get is 3 to 4. 220 divided by 3 gives an odd number, a complicated number. Well, what is it about? 220, 210 would be 70. It's 73.3333, etc. And this you have to multiply by 4, makes 493 approximately, does it? I think so. And then that's why you get now the 493 and a very low note, which is what was it? 330, 3 to 4. No, 493 minus 220. So, and there you hear already the note is becoming rough. And the next consonants now would be the major third. It still sounds fairly consonant, but you get very low fundamental. You hear that? And yeah, you get a Well, where is it? There it is. This note is reinforced, which is the ninth overtone. Because these two obviously relate most like 8 to 10. Or like, what is this, major third? 4 to 5 makes the 9. Major third is 4 to 5. So if you add them, you get the ninth overtone. And if you subtract them, 5 minus 4 makes the fundamental, is 1. But very, very low. So this, I should look for, this is 4, 2, 1. You get this fundamental. If I just hit one note, the next one is the reverse of this note, which is the, what corresponds to the major third is the minor 6, which is this one. Then we have the minor third. Here now the dissonance is coming. And to this corresponds the major 6. And now we have the major second and the major seventh. And finally, we have the minor second. And we have the major sevenths. These are the most dissonant then. These two. And finally, the tritonus, which is, as we always call, the devil in music. Is a mixture of consonances and dissonances. Not so devilish, I like it very much. It's related to this note. So when I play the mantra, then you see how it is composed. The first one is the fundamental itself. At the end of the first limb, you have the best consonants you could find, which is the fifth. So it's like a half cadence in classical music, if I might say. So we have, we go away, further dissonance, and resolution, half resolution, more consonant. The next one, but it's always more or less, more or less, more or less dissonant. It is as if I had, how can I say, defined the complete system of classical organization of consonances and dissonances, which means simply of relationships between more or less periodic vibrations. That's nothing else what we are talking about at this moment. As if I had verticalized the whole thing into the timbre construction. So the timbres are no longer coloring something which is already there, but they become an integral part of the composition. You cannot separate timbre from harmony anymore. And this is, I think, a new perspective of timbre and harmonic composition.
Could I say that, in fact, in the use of this ring modulator is almost a justification of the diatonic system and its relationship of notes to each other?
Well, it is not only diatonic. I use...
Scientifically that,
Pardon?
It proves scientifically that the diatonic system is a...
No, I base it on
order.
the chromatic system, don't I? I use all 12 notes.
Yes, but I'm referring to the fact that the least dissonant sound is produced by the nearest related note, which is the fifth, which in the diatonic system is the fifth.
Yeah, but the diatonic system is in this larger system.
Yes, that's what I'm...
Yes, naturally. Historically, we are not replacing one concept by another one. We're just expanding it, that's all.
May I ask you?
Yes.
Does the, to my ear, the apparent inability to sustain the long notes of the modulators,
Yes.
do you compensate for this in any way, or does it worry you at all?
Well, no, you must remember that there are now in the complete first section, where I want to make that very clear, you have something that lasts, I think, 3 or 4 minutes. going through the two pianos.
Yes, but in in the original form of the third statement,
Yes.
in the bass,
Yes.
the power of sustained sound is missing with the modulator.
Yes. Well, that.
Does it not matter?
No, I mean, matter to what? I mean, it happens.
To the ear. I mean,
You hear first the modulated sound, and when the
no,
sound.
you don't. It doesn't have the power of sustaining those lower.
Well, as long as the piano note sustains.
Not without the modulator. It sustains longer, actually.
No.
And now you're using the sustaining pedal.
No, I have no pedal. But even so, I could. I mean, there's nothing against the pedal. What is the point? I hear the overtone, which is the modulated note.
I'm sorry, it might be in the manner of performance because
the other things are going on.
Other things
Because
are
there's
going
something on top. Yes. Naturally.
Can I ask a question about mantric music? Do you, in your conception of mantric music, does it have to be composed in as systematic a way as you compose this?
No. That was just the particular approach of that composition. No. I think each musical composition should have a complete new concept of how to organize a sound of a world of sounds. No. It could be completely intuitive, as we have played other music, and it sometimes happens even much more pure and much more direct to achieve something like this mantric music that Aurobindo is speaking of, without any mental process.
Do you consider this as a piece of religious music in that case? I mean, do you consider the person who's listening to this should go through a religious experience or an artistic experience, or what?
Certainly, except that it is not related to a specific dogmatic religion that we know, but the universe is the divine that he is speaking of.
So you see this as a sort of way into the oversoul or whatever?
To what?
As a way into the oversoul. I mean, is the entire
I didn't understand the word. To the over what?
The oversoul. Or
I see.
whatever.
Well, I hadn't heard that word, but it's the same. It's
In the
okay.
bit of paper.
Yes. Well.
I mean, is it an entry into that? Is this what the piece of music is?
Well, I have said the music is, in its best aspects, organized like I imagine the atoms are organized, and we are organized in a larger cosm that we cannot overlook ourselves, because we are just like a single note in this complete piece, a composition, each of us, like one of those little grace notes, perhaps, and yes, I mean, then you can see that the A in the whole first section is like a center of a whole galaxy, whereas in one single mantra, the A is like a sun with its 11 or 12 planets around it, with very precise distances. We have all the possibilities of relating such a world of music to the micro and macrocosm as we know it. It is a sort of a little musical, how can I say, kaleidoscope that shows directly its relationships to our modern knowledge of the microcosms of the atom and of astronomy. Yes.
Tell me to what extent the spatial aspect of having the two pianos a long way apart
Right.
came into
Well, the spatial aspect is entirely the result of an equality of rights that I have established between two players, which means I have tried to give to each one similar activity, and therefore sometimes one player plays the mantra, then another one, but I have also naturally be careful not to do it in a foreseeable way, that it's just A, B, A, B, A, B, A. Also technically that's not possible if I let run through always these large mantras which draw together entire regions, then I let one pianist be more in the background and another one come in the foreground and vice versa in the next version. And then sometimes this is speeded up, this alternation, also according to dramatic feelings, that I think now it's time that the changes happen a little faster than before. And then I leave one player alone for a long while, etc.
The passage you read from Aurobindo, he said that this new kind of music, which was to be mantric music, would not be intellectual. Now, I would have thought that your systematic method of composition would preclude that possibility of being mantric because it would be intellectual. I mean, I would have thought this would be a very good example of intellectual kind of composition. I would have thought that what Aurobindo had in mind was more the intuitive method.
Well, you have the impression that intuition is excluded in this work?
Well, I would have thought it would be excluded by your systematic approach.
Well, it's true that I have emphasized the mental process of the making. But I have started by saying that I was humming the melody itself, wrote it down, took it as something that I found, and then I said all the determinations, for example, how to make this entire macrocosmic organization is something that you just see in one. It is even not so much my own invention. I said it has something to do with the tree of life, with generations and so many things.
This is an intellectual idea, this idea of the tree of life, the idea of a planetary system.
No,
it's
not
an
when I look
idea.
out of the window of my house. It's not an intellectual idea that a tree makes this and goes in smaller and smaller branches. It's very natural. And it's not me who has thought this out.
No.
Oh, no, by no means. That is one of the essential qualities of life and of growth. That you come to the smaller, like in a Gothic cathedral. The higher you go, the smaller are the same elements that you see already at the basis, the fundamental. It's nothing else. These are principles that you find everywhere.
Yes, but what I had in mind was that principles themselves were an intellectualization.
Well, there's always that misunderstanding, the mental. You can make, so to speak, with a purely mental approach, you can make an object which does not transcend the mental. So then there would be no excursions, there would be no concepts which cannot be derived from the object that you start with, let's say a series. I doubt even if we can make anything without intuition. It is perhaps so that I have put the accent tonight on the organization, but you must never forget from where it comes from and what it is supposed to lead to. You see, that has become very clear, and that becomes very clear when you play the piece. That it tries to transcend itself all the time. Yes. In particular, with these breakthroughs, you will see there are moments, there's one moment, for example, where they get so stuck in the complications, when the wood blocks hammer against each other, that finally they can't help, they can't continue anymore, and one gets up and just starts using his voice at some moment. And he says, "Oh!" to the other one. So this is breaking out of this complicated mental world. So I think we need the mental always very much in order to apply intuitive forces to our means, to the material. We have a materialistic world, and that is wonderful, because it needs the channelings. As musicians, we have to deal with strings and wood and people, and it must all work, and they must be able to play it, etc. So it's a very physical aspect which must be organized by the mental. Otherwise, it falls apart. It doesn't work. You make mistakes and so on. Yes.
Would you say that in creating the mantra, you became the mantra itself, that you were the work of art, and that this is the ashes of experience that we now hear?
Well, as well during the act of composition, I have, as also during several performances, I have been totally absorbed by the sounds. I became the sounds, and in particular, I went through all the cycles. Yes, I have become mantra many times, and that was the crucial point actually when I was composing it. Day and night were no longer separated. It was, I would say, the happiest composition time that I have ever had up to now. And it's too strange because it almost went all by itself. I didn't need to do very much because it all had to be derived, and it flourished, and that was it. But I was so sure, I had no doubts, as usual, that it would perhaps not work aesthetically or God knows what. It was all clear. So I became easily one with mantra. And it was extremely happy. And no matter what the people say, there is an old-fashioned piece, and they find old styles in the piece. So what? I say, yes, it's great. Because if once you start working with such a principle, you give birth also to everything every now and then that has already existed before. It includes all the varieties that have occurred in a different context. Once you have such a genetic force working, then you produce all the children that have existed before. But the general world is new. It transcends again the known world, I would say.
Could you say anything at all about your organization of rhythmic detail, such as the sforzando chords that we heard in that long extract? I mean, when they should come and that kind of thing, or is this too complicated?
No, it's all in here. When the sforzato is written, and when we are in the 12th section, then there will be sforzati everywhere. And whenever we have the 12th expansion of the mantra, it will be just cluttered with sforzati. I mean, I have practically no choice. It all comes out of the mantra because all the dynamics are given in this piece here. Whenever one note is determining a whole mantra or a whole cycle of mantras, then they are predominantly piano. The second one are piano with forte. The third one are mezzo piano. The fourth one are again piano. Then the next one are pianissimo. And the sixth one is mezzo forte. The seventh one is fortissimo with decrescendo, etc.
Yes, so when you say one of them is full of chords or something, well...
Then each chord, each note of the mantra has a chord going with it. Yes. And how the chords are made, you have seen. Yes. They are nothing but verticalizations of mantric notes. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Did you have the idea of ring modulation from the very beginning?
Yes.
From the start?
Even before I decided to write a piece for two pianos, because I have made a piece which has also been, you say published on records or multiplied, I mean, issued on records. It's called Karlheinz Stockhausen. and it was a piece for the birthday of Beethoven in 1970. And I used lots of excerpts of Beethoven music, of all his works, going from the earliest period to the last period, in 4 categories: strings and piano music and orchestra music and vocal music. And I composed it in such a way that there are 4 tapes. The material on the tapes I have organized. I have distorted the music of Beethoven as if it would come through a shortwave radio late at night. And in the Beethoven year, naturally. There was nothing but this music. And then I gave this to 4 players with whom I'm working very often. We have a group of intuitive music, and they played with a score short waves that I had composed before, with Beethoven material rather than with radio material. Shortwaves is a piece where they have to use radio material, pick up events out of the radio, and then transform them according to transformation science. In this particular case, we didn't use radios, but the Beethoven music. What I mean by this is that in transforming the Beethoven music, to make it sound more or less transformed or even distorted, as I said, like coming through a shortwave receiver, I used all sorts of technical means in the studio, and among them was the ring modulation process. And there I caught on. I have then been so interested in ring modulating piano music, I found a special way to do it. Also, this box is not just a simple way. You have to compress the piano sound and then cut off the peaks, etc., and then feed it into the ring modulator, and have a special ring modulator made which does not modulate the overtones of the fundamental. Otherwise, they come through again in the result.
Yes, I was surprised how well it...
How clean it is. Yes, it is a specially made one, where also the second and third harmonic are with a shifting filter, constantly pushed backwards 40 dB so that they don't come through. It's amazing that after almost 20 years of working in a studio for electronic music, without any instruments in the studio, I mean, that I discover all of a sudden a new way of how to modulate the piano. I should have done this before. But that's the way it goes.
Do you think that music is heading in any one particular direction?
Is going in a one?
Yeah, one particular direction.
No, not at the moment. The world is splitting into innumerable different directions as the people are splitting. We are in the process of disintegration everywhere in the Western world in particular, but I would say all over the globe. And we cannot expect for quite a while to have again a unified outlook, let's say, like we have perhaps had one up to the Renaissance, which was given by a religion and nothing else. And afterwards it was given by some concept of man and all his feelings and emotions and quarrels and joys. But also this has fallen apart. Man is no longer in the center. But there is no unifying spirit at the moment. People are going in all directions at once. And this will last for several centuries before, again, I would say 3-4 centuries, mankind is focusing in a more anonymous way on a spiritual goal. Because we still have all this process going on where religions are fading out and one sect is coming in after another and one guru after new one is praising the divine in a new way. And most of the people don't believe anything or are negatively against it, are nihilists, and so on and so forth. So how can music be going in one direction? It is not possible. It is not possible. Most of the music will just be made for filling time of people who don't know what to do, who are afraid of being alone, who use it like they would use drugs or just for divertisement, for distraction, not to be in the silence. They are terrified to have silence, and so they put on music all the time, etc. So music becomes a kind of furniture now for a long time.
What about the practicalities of performing the music?
Pardon?
What about the practicalities of performing the music? Because this piece can't be available to that many pianists. And likewise with your other work.
Why not?
It seems fairly hard. Perhaps they can answer.
Oh, no, no. And we don't need the music that, well, where will you stop in defining the level of difficulty?
It depends, presumably, how much you'd like your pieces performed. It could depend on that.
Yeah, it will be performed as much as people want to listen to it and to pay for a performance. That's all. Because there are enough pianists available, but nobody wants them really. Or very, very few people want them. I mean, one duo in the world, we have 2 or 3 famous duos of duo pianism, and that is enough. Like the conductors or like solo pianists, they cover the complete world nowadays. They do most of the records and the recordings in radios, and on the big festivals they occur. They're always the same. I mean, there are very few. They can really satisfy the demands of all the musical festivals and activities. Whereas in former times, still up to a very present time, there was space for mediocre orchestras or pianists or conductors that were not always that extraordinary or appealing, but because they had a more local region to satisfy, the people were happy to have them. But nowadays everybody wants the best, the most chic, the most streamlined, the most modern, the most famous, etc. So they have it. Yes.
Do you think for this piece to work as a mantra and knocking holes in your consciousness, it's essential to understand the form of it, or helpful, or even possibly a hindrance?
Well, that is... May I ask another question? Do you think you can be deeply moved by looking at the sky without knowing all the proportions between the stars and their speeds and their relationships in terms of astronomy?
Oh,
yeah, well, that's the same.
Well, excuse me, I'd like to say then, why do so many people find much of your music inaccessible? Not for want of trying, I mean.
No, because we are all different. And I can only make a music which completely satisfies my demand that I put upon myself, where I think this is good, and this is what I identify with. And there is no question that there are very few people, as far as as my experience goes, who would identify with what I find is good and what satisfies me. We are very different.
There seems to be an impediment in the more educated you are in the Western tradition, as it were, the way of analytical thinking, the more you find it difficult to work into the music. Like I've played the music to people who haven't heard a great deal of Western music before, and they find it quite immediately accessible. And
yeah, that's true. I mean, the mental is mainly used in a wrong way, and the more and more in our Western society, because we are educated in the wrong way. We think we have to use mainly the mental in order to make things that are like the organization of the mental itself, whereas there is another approach to life which says that you might use the mental in order to filter out what the mental knows already and then discover the new. You can use the filter in order to satisfy the mental, you see?
So you train these...
You can, you see what I mean? There is a certain knowledge, what we call a knowledge. The mind is full of memory and knowledge that is stored, like on a tape recorder. And when something comes, then you compare it immediately. So you say wonderful or not. And most of the people, when they say wonderful, all they are saying is that what they have stored is similar to what they experience. And then they are happy.
And you train your intuitive musicians to sort of suspend this wall.
Yes, exactly. To use intuitive mental in the opposite way, which means to filter out what I know already, and then see if something remains.
Have you ever written anything to so ordinary people who aren't able to go to your courses, for instance, that can train themselves in this way of thinking? Or
yes, I have. Well, yes, I have published 3 books about all different aspects of music, which are called texts 1, 2, and 3.
Huh.
Yes?
May I say that there seems to me no difference between this work and the concerto, the sonata for 2 pianos by Mozart. Intellectual ideas are so meaningless to me because if you look at the structure of a Mozart sonata, you are also involved with the thinking of the composer, but you are also receiving directly the immediate intuitive process. And this is all that's happening here. Forgive me making that remark instead of a question.
Oh no, that is clear to me too. I would even go a little further and say, after Mantra was ready, and I talked to the pianist, and he said, how amazing, there's nothing in the literature for 2 pianos or for piano that is constructed in a similar way or that sounds alike. And I said, well, let's think if there's anything in our history of music which has been constructed in a similar way. And I could only think, all of a sudden, of the last works of Bach, where he uses always the same melodic formula in Kunst der Fuge, the art of the fugue, and also das musikalische Opfer. How is this in English?
Yes, the musical offering.
Musical offering. It didn't occur to me when I was working on this that there's a very similar process. He didn't have the expansion technique, which is, I think, something new. I also haven't seen it elsewhere. This particular expansion technique in time and in the registers, in the field of pitches, I think it's very general. Everybody can use it now. But it is the same principle.
I think what's interesting is that this is basically really simple. And to me, what I find about that exciting about the best music is this central simplicity.
Yes.
To be simple is to be
yes,
subtle.
Then you can transcend the mental very quickly.
About expansion, as you mentioned just now, I wasn't clear how you arrived at the scales of the expansions.
At what? At the expansions?
Scales of the expansions themselves.
Well, nowadays you have electronic instruments which have a knob that change. Let's say an octave which has so much space on the instrument and 12 keys, and when you turn the knob, then the octave is no longer octave, but it comes either smaller, and then the 12 steps, let's say, are within a fifth or a fourth of a major third, or finally within one micro interval. Or the other way around, the octave becomes as wide as the complete piano, and then each step is 7 times as large as usual. So you can stretch and contract the distance between 2 notes, which correspond to the key. You have 12 keys, but the step from one key to the next in terms of sound can change and can be changed continuously with modern instruments. So there we have a continuous possibility of changing the scale and the width of the scale. When I use the piano, the gentleman has mentioned, then I cannot, for this particular piece, tune the piano always anew for each section of the piece. But what I do is I leave out certain steps, and then when we have the chromatic scale, I use all these in one octave, what we call an octave, where the sounds sound alike. If I would say that these 12 steps I stretch now over the whole piano, then I do this. That makes 12. So then I would make a music which has no other possibilities than these 12 notes. You see, then I would have a complete a piano only with 12 keys, and the distance from one key to the next would be so wide as I have just played it. So the music would sound all the time like this. Because I have no other keys. So I must make music with 12 notes. And this is what I am doing here in mantra. I change now the scale from the most narrow scale.
Yes, but I'm not clear what intervals you actually used in the expansions. For instance, you said that in the second expansion you expanded the octave to a ninth.
Yes.
So, for instance, what 12 notes did you use between the ninths?
Aha, well, I leave out 2 notes. I make twice a major second instead of a minor second. That's all. And that distorts irregularly the mantra when I play it then with these 12 notes. You see? The scale is now, for example, from A. There's a major second. Instead of this, I have. There's the second one. Rather than. So now the mantra becomes slightly distorted, as you have heard. When I play now the mantra with these notes, then this one becomes, because 2 minor seconds have become major seconds, so that stretches the mantra a little bit. Pardon? And then when I have the next scale, then I have a mixture of minor seconds and major seconds, but more major seconds. For example, there's already one. That is what the gentleman mentioned before, like in a diatonic scale. Again one. There's a minor second, major second, major second. So in this, then, in this scale, the mantra sounds again more expanded, which it sounds not, but it sounds. This is the major seventh, because it is stretched already. And finally, it is. You understand? Etc. So the mantra is stretched the most possible, because otherwise they would have to play. That would be a very nice theater piece. The next expansion would be, etc. It's possible.
Have you arranged your expanded scales so that, say, your new octave now becomes a major 9? Have you still organized it so that within your new octave you still have each of the 12 chromatic notes there?
Well, as much as possible. No, what I do is that in 2 octaves that are next to each other, real octaves, I try to repeat as few notes as possible, so that there are as little real octaves occurring as possible.
Oh, I see. But in each new octave, say the octave becomes
then it's always the same.
Yeah,
so if I once have, then the next one would be the same. I'm very pleased that you asked so many musical questions. That's quite unusual. Yes?
How far does Mandel's ideas of teaching music influence your compositions today?
I'm very sorry. I could not understand you. Could you just allow a little silence? Yes.
How far do mantric ideas influence your present composition, your composition today?
Well, if I take this sentence for serious, we would create a mantric music or poetry to bring the gods into our life. Then I would say all of my work should become mantric art, mantric music. Nothing else.
And were you influenced at all before you actually wrote mantra by mantric thoughts?
Well, since my very first piece, all my works have had that same direction. Also, when I did not call it mantra. Oh yes. Since the first works. We have discussed already 1951, 52, When I composed Kreuzspiel, there are 40, 50 letters which are going to be published soon as an exchange between Karlheinz, a Belgian composer, and myself about the new technique and the new music. And you find in almost all the letters this direct reference to the music in which the individual note should be treated like a star or like an individual spirit in the universe, like a person in a human society, yes.
In this composition, you've done many manipulations with the original mantra, many permutations of it, many mathematical or many whatever. Why did you stop there? Or better yet, why did you go as far as you did? Or could you have added more manipulations, more permutations, more elements to the composition?
Well, I could have.
Why did you
but
stop
then
there?
I would have gone beyond the mantra itself, because it has just 13 cycles according to the 13 initial notes, and in each cycle it has 12 transpositions over the sounds of the mantra itself, and that's it. So I have just stopped where there was everything fulfilled.
How does the addition of the antique cymbals and the tempo block play into this?
Well, I mentioned this briefly. The antique cymbals indicate just the large sections, which means that I have counted the number of the mantras according to the number that is applied to each pitch within the mantra. If you recall, number 1, number 3, number 12, number 8, number 9, number 6, number 11, etc. And these numbers I have chosen in order to grasp together. This is interesting for you because you don't know this yet. No, look what I have done. I have now counted. Where's that stick? I want to have the stick. I have counted now the mantras in the following way. 1 mantra, 3 mantras, 12 mantras, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And every time when there is a subdivision, 1, 3, then there is a stroke of the antique symbol with the pitch of the mantra itself, which means the first antique symbol has the A, the next one the B, and with that accent at the end. The third antique symbol has the G sharp. The fourth antique symbol has this, also with this ticka-ticka-tay before. And they subdivide now the entire piece. As you know, 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 up to 12 makes 78. I have said this before. Only here in a different order. We have 1 plus 3 plus 12 plus 8 plus 9 plus 6, etc. But it adds up to 78 mantras. Which means that up to the middle of the piece, we have reached 1/2 cycle, and 12 times an antique symbol has been hit. And then in the second cycle we have again 78, and 78 plus 78 is 156. So there's a wonderful number relationship between 1 up to 12 adding up to 76, and this twice reaches 78, excuse me. 178, reaching 156, and that then comes to the same number as there are mantras, which is very beautiful, so that actually we will have 24 mantras, cymbal antique strokes, which have then subdivided the work in these sections. And each section now has an overall characteristic, again, which is indicated by these characteristics, and this I have explained before. Regular repetition. The next one is accents at the end. The next one is normal notes. And they follow, as I say, these numerical groupings. 1 plus 3 plus 12 up to here. The next one is 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So here will fall together with the beginning of section number 3 also an antic cymbal stroke and change the character again, which goes then to a section where we have many grace notes. So that is the function of the antic cymbals, and the wood blocks have a similar function. Slightly different, yes.
In the beginning you played the notes without a rhythm. Was there anything that governed the choice of the rhythm and dynamics?
Clear. You see it. We have 4 different durations, and then I made a pause. The pause was not in the car when I was humming it. I added it later. So it is a natural pause. Ta-da-ti-da, pause. La-da. And the repetition also wasn't that often. Da-da-ba-da. That's all I remember. But it adds up to 6. It has 3 limbs. Here 4. 1, 2, 3, 4 notes. 3 notes, 3 times 2. Then 5 and 3. So actually we have 4, 6, 5, 3 notes. And the duration is different for each note, as I said.
What made you choose the A to be repeated 4 times and then the B to have a dotted note and
this here?
4? Yes.
Well, because I wanted that this single note, which is 1/4 note, that this single note has the character of regular repetition. Ta-ka-ta-ta. That is a character. You understand? That's all. I could also have made 5. Ta-ka-ta-ka-ta. Possible. But I just said ta-ka-ta-ta.
There was no logical reasoning. It was just a question of fantasy.
You mean for the ta-ka-ta-ta?
Yes. And the following.
Yes. That's a reason of fantasy. That's right. Ta-ka-ta-ta. Right. Yes?
It seems to me that different people have different ideas about music. But what would your idea of music be? I mean, I could go on the piano now and I could go plonk.
Yes.
In 1 second without thinking.
Yes.
You could do exactly the same with a lot of work. What's your idea of that?
Well, I think more or less, we always exteriorize, we materialize what we are. And we are what comes through us. We are not just ourselves. Something manifests through each person in all the varieties. There are not really 2 who are the same. So if you do just blank, then that's what you are. I wouldn't even say that I would ever like to miss that. You see, it is necessary to estimate something else, a difference. Though I would say there are more or less unconscious ways of approaching something, of exteriorizing oneself, or this force that is manifest within us. So if you do it unconsciously, I also could, perhaps in a very unconscious moment, could be very vulgar. But in general, it simply happens less and less. That's because I'm more and more conscious and I don't need it. But I can perfectly understand it whenever it happens.
Can I ask you also how much emotion comes into your music? Because from my point of view, I can appreciate that this composition is very good, but it doesn't interest me emotionally. How much emotion?
Well, wait until before you say that, because I'm sure when you hear longer stretches, it has a long breath, no question about this. It doesn't make sense to hear small bits. Then they are like firework sometimes, or like little whisper, or just like a little emotional vibration. But if you hear longer stretches, you begin to to dive into this time, as particular timing. And I'm sure that you will find everything that you are able to make become alive within yourself, I'm sure. Well, thank you very much.